Most people eating bread every morning have no idea what is actually in it. We investigated 10 of the biggest bread brands in America. Florida's Department of Health pulled loaves straight from grocery store shelves and sent them to a certified lab. Multiple brands came back positive for glyphosate, the active chemical in Roundup, not on the farm. In the finished bread you are slicing and eating every single day. Here is what nobody is telling you. Some of the worst results did not come from the cheap brands. They came from the ones with organic labels, the ones marketed to health-conscious families, the ones people pay extra for specifically because they think they are making the safer choice. One brand tested above 1,000 parts per billion of glyphosate, one of the highest levels ever recorded in a packaged consumer bread. You are going to recognize the name. We are counting down all 10 from concerning to genuinely shocking, then finishing with the 3 brands that came back clean and are actually worth buying. Let's get into it. Number 10. Great Value Whole Wheat, Walmart. This is Walmart's house bread, the one that fills carts because it is cheap, familiar, and always in stock. Before you open it, try something. Press on the bag. It doesn't feel like bread. It compresses completely and bounces straight back, like a foam cushion shaped into a loaf. That is your first clue that something engineered is happening inside. The Detox Project and the Environmental Working Group found 340 parts per billion of glyphosate in Great Value whole wheat through independent laboratory testing. Regulators will tell you that is legal. The EPA's ceiling for glyphosate on wheat is 30,000 parts per billion, but that number was calculated for one chemical, in one food, for one healthy adult in isolation. It was never designed to account for someone already on blood pressure medication, already getting glyphosate from their morning cereal and afternoon crackers, now adding it again at dinner. Exposure stacks. The regulatory math doesn't. Walmart generated over $713 billion in revenue last year. Sourcing cleaner grain is not a financial constraint at that scale. It is a margin decision. The 80 cents you saved came with something extra that was never listed on the label. Number 9. Market Pantry Organic, Target. This one surprises people. Target spent years positioning itself as the smarter, cleaner alternative. Better design, more intentional sourcing. The store young families choose because it just feels different. Their Market Pantry whole wheat sandwich bread carries a USDA organic seal. It tested at 348 parts per billion of glyphosate in independent laboratory testing. Higher than Wonder Bread, an organic loaf outscoring conventional bread on contamination. Here is how that happens. It is called drift contamination. When a conventional farm adjacent to an organic operation sprays herbicide, the mist does not stop at the fence line. It travels. USDA organic certification verifies that the producer did not intentionally apply glyphosate. It does not verify that none arrived from a neighboring field. Drift testing is not required. Target does not publish it. A parent reaches for this loaf specifically to protect their kids. They pay the premium. They see the seal. The certification is legitimate. The contamination is also legitimate. The law that would require anyone to disclose the gap between the two simply does not exist. That is not consumer protection. That is a hole the industry has quietly decided to leave open. Number 8. Oro Wheat Organic. This is the Kraft brand that quietly stopped being one. 2 families started baking bread together in Los Angeles in 1932. For decades, it was a genuine regional institution. Family-owned, California-made, quality-focused. In 2009, Grupo Bimbo acquired it. Since then, Bimbo has also absorbed Arnold, Sara Lee, Entenmann's, Thomas's, Ballpark, and dozens more. One multinational now controls what most shoppers still believe are independent, competing brands. When Bimbo absorbs a brand, the supply chain follows. Same flour suppliers, same wheat sources, the same grain potentially pre-harvest treated with glyphosate as a desiccant across their broader industrial network. The Environmental Working Group reported 70 parts per billion of glyphosate in Oro Wheat, 100% whole wheat, back in 2018. Bimbo reformulated certain products after those results went public, but there has been no publicly available independent glyphosate testing on Oro Wheat Organic since. The last number on record is still 70 parts per billion from 2018. Bimbo generates $22 billion in annual revenue. If they are testing every batch, they have not published the results. Longtime customers describe the pre-acquisition bread as denser, grainier, more varied in texture. What is on shelves today is uniform, soft, and engineered to hold that softness through a long retail window. You are paying for the logo. Everything else was replaced years ago. Number 7. Nature's Own. Flowers Foods is one of the largest bread companies in America. $5 billion a year in revenue. Nature's Own is their flagship, and the name is doing a lot of work. Natural, wholesome, a bread that implies it came from somewhere intentional. In February 2026, Florida's Department of Health tested Nature's Own butter bread. The result? 190 parts per billion of glyphosate. Their perfectly crafted white came back at 132. But the glyphosate is only part of the story. Read what else is in the loaf. Calcium propionate, a preservative that peer-reviewed research has connected to behavioral effects in children. Datum, a chemically modified fat used to strengthen dough structure. Sodium stearoyl lactylate, an emulsifier that maintains engineered softness for weeks past any natural freshness window. Squeeze the bag. That pillowy give is not freshness, it is formulation. In 2025, a video spread widely online showing someone soaking a single slice of Nature's Own with water, wringing it out completely, and watching it spring back to its original shape without tearing. That is not bread. That is a sponge shaped into a loaf. In July 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed in California federal court, alleging that Flowers Foods falsely markets certain Nature's Own products as containing no artificial preservatives, while ascorbic acid appears on the label. Flowers has denied the allegations. At $5 billion in annual revenue, cleaner sourcing is not out of reach. It just compresses the margin, and margin is what gets protected. Number 6. Arnold Organic. Arnold has been on American shelves since 1940. When the organic line launched, health-conscious shoppers saw it as the answer, a legacy brand finally living up to its reputation. USDA Organic on the front, whole grains listed first. The combination that signals trust without requiring further investigation. Arnold is owned by Bimbo Bakeries USA, same parent company as Oro Wheat, same $22 billion industrial operation. Here is the specific problem. Sara Lee has been independently tested for glyphosate. Nature's Own has been tested. Dave's Killer Bread has been tested across multiple years by multiple independent labs. Arnold Organic, from the same parent company that owns several of them, has no publicly available glyphosate test results that we could locate anywhere. We are not claiming Arnold's numbers would match anyone's worst result. We cannot make that claim, because the data does not exist publicly. What we can say is that Bimbo's track record across every other brand they control makes this silence difficult to explain. They paid for the organic certification. They have not shown you what that certification actually delivers. The ingredient list adds context. Organic soybean oil, organic cane sugar, cultured wheat flour, ascorbic acid. These are not the components of traditional bread. The slices are geometrically uniform. The texture holds for weeks at room temperature. Real bread does not behave like that. 85 years of brand equity, no public test data. That combination is not reassurance. It is a question the company has decided you don't need answered. Number 5. Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread does not claim to be organic. It claims to be the American family staple, the loaf your grandmother trusted, the one that belongs on every kitchen counter. Florida's Department of Health tested Wonder Bread Classic White in February 2026. 73 parts per billion of glyphosate. Now read the ingredient label alongside that number. Calcium sulfate, the same compound used in construction drywall. Sodium stearoyl lactylate, monocalcium peroxide, enriched bleached wheat flour, stripped of nutrients, bleached, then fortified with synthetic vitamins to replace what the processing took out. Press a loaf in the store and it collapses to almost nothing, then fully recovers. That behavior is the ingredient list expressing itself physically. Wonder Bread is owned by Flowers Foods, same parent company as Nature's Own, same supply chain. The long-term math is what matters here. This is the bread bought in the highest volume by the households that can least afford the accumulated exposure. Eaten every day, for decades, by people who trusted the name precisely because it has been on the shelf their entire lives. Number 4. Sara Lee. Sara Lee occupies the comfortable middle of the bread aisle. Not the cheapest, not premium. The reliable soft loaf marketed heavily to families with the language of softness and wholesomeness. It is another Bimbo Bakeries brand, running on the same industrial grain supply as Orowheat and Arnold. Independent testing has repeatedly detected glyphosate in Sara Lee products across multiple years, but the more revealing issue is the formulation philosophy. Sara Lee's soft white and made with whole grain varieties lead their ingredient panels with refined enriched flour, then add just enough whole grain to justify the front label claim. Made with whole grain is not the same as whole grain. It is a legally permitted phrase that requires only that some whole grain be present, not that the loaf be predominantly whole grain. A shopper reading the front of the bag believes they are buying fiber and intact grain. The ingredient panel tells a different story, in an order most people never read. The softness that Sara Lee is known for comes from the same emulsifier and dough conditioner system as the rest of the industrial category. Additives engineered to hold texture through a long retail window. You are buying the feeling of homemade bread, produced by the chemistry of shelf stability. Number 3. Pepperidge Farm. The red bag, the old-fashioned lettering, the name that sounds like a property with a stone wall and a kitchen garden. Pepperidge Farm has been baking since 1937. The bread people reach for when they want something that feels a step above everything else on the shelf. Pepperidge Farm is owned by the Campbell Company, over $10 billion in annual revenue. Independent laboratory testing found 587 parts per billion of glyphosate in Pepperidge Farm 100% whole grain whole wheat bread. Their Jewish rye and pumpernickel deli swirl tested at 531 parts per billion. The reason is specific and worth understanding. Glyphosate is used as a pre-harvest desiccant. Some conventional farmers spray Roundup directly onto standing grain to accelerate drying before harvest. That final application, days before collection, concentrates residues in the outer hull of the kernel. Whole wheat bread retains that hull. A product marketed as the healthier choice can carry higher contamination than white bread made from flour that stripped the outer layer away. Choosing whole grain, in this case, sometimes means choosing more exposure. The manufacturer of glyphosate, Bayer, which acquired Monsanto, has paid approximately $11 billion to settle nearly 100,000 lawsuits filed by people who developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In February 2026, Bayer proposed a further $7.25 billion settlement for current and future claims. Bayer continues to deny that glyphosate causes cancer. Pepperidge Farm shoppers report a chemical off-taste, noticeable quality decline, and shrinkflation that reduced loaf weight while the price held steady. You are paying a heritage premium for grain sourced the same way as every other industrial brand on this list. Number 2. Dave's Killer Bread. This is the brand health-conscious shoppers reach for with complete confidence. Bold graphic packaging, dense seeded loaves, a founder's redemption story on every bag, USDA organic certified, non-GMO project verified. Nutritionists post about it. Trainers recommend it. It is in millions of kitchens right now because the people who bought it genuinely believe they have already solved the bread problem. Then the lab results came back. The Alliance for Natural Health found 136 parts per billion of glyphosate in Dave's Killer Bread whole wheat. Florida's Department of Health found 11.85 parts per billion in their white done right variety and 10.38 in their 21 whole grains and seeds. Those numbers are lower than the conventional brands. That is the precise issue. Lower is not the same as zero. A brand that has built its entire identity on being the gold standard of organic bread and charges the price to match, has made a specific promise. This is not a close call. It is a broken promise. You are not paying a premium for almost better. Flowers Foods acquired Dave's Killer Bread in 2015 for $275 million. Distribution expanded almost immediately from a regional Pacific Northwest operation to nationwide scale. The founder's story stayed on the bag. The industrial supply chain moved in quietly behind it. Dave's Killer Bread is owned by the same $5 billion corporation that owns Nature's Own and Wonder Bread. Same parent company, same sourcing infrastructure. In September 2024, a class action was certified in California federal court, alleging the company misleads consumers about the protein content on the front labels of their Good Seed and 21 whole grains and seeds varieties. Flowers Foods has denied the allegations. Some people buy Dave's Killer Bread because it is the only bread their body tolerates. That makes the gap between what this brand promises and what the lab found more serious, not less. Number 1. 365 by Whole Foods. Amazon owns Whole Foods. Whole Foods sells 365 brand organic bread. Independent laboratory testing found glyphosate at 1,040 parts per billion in 365 whole wheat sandwich bread. 1,040 parts per billion. That figure appears near the top of every independent test database of branded consumer bread we reviewed. Whole Foods built their identity around what they refuse to sell. Bromated flour, banned. Artificial colors, banned. Their published list of unacceptable ingredients contains over 80 substances. Every part of the store experience communicates one message. Here, the standard is different. The test result does not match the message. Amazon acquired Whole Foods in 2017 for $13.7 billion. Since then, multiple former executives have publicly described a more centralized, more industrialized supply chain, replacing the sourcing philosophy Whole Foods was built on, decisions driven by logistics metrics rather than ingredient standards. The industry's response is predictable. They will point out that 1,040 parts per billion is still below the EPA's legal ceiling of 30,000. What they will not mention is the 2015 King's College London peer-reviewed study showing that ultra-low doses of Roundup, below the levels regulators currently measure for human food, produced measurable changes in gene expression across thousands of transcripts in the livers and kidneys of laboratory rats. Not industrial doses. Ultra-low, below what the current regulatory system even tracks. Those tolerances were designed for a healthy adult in their 30s consuming one chemical from one food, not for someone in their 70s managing blood pressure, cholesterol, and thyroid medication, adding bread residues on top of cereal, crackers, and pasta across the same afternoon. You did everything right. You paid the premium. You chose the store with the reputation. You picked the house brand organic loaf because you trusted what the store stood for. The lab result is the answer to a question you should never have had to ask. That is all 10. And here is what the pattern actually tells you. The problems do not track price. Budget, mid-range, premium, organic. The contamination tracks transparency, or the lack of it. Now here are the 3 brands that came back clean and told you exactly how they did it. Best option number 3, Food for Life, Ezekiel 4:9, sprouted grain bread. Ezekiel bread is built on a fundamentally different premise than everything on the avoid list. It is made from sprouted whole grains and legumes. The grains are germinated before milling, which changes the nutritional structure of the loaf and, critically, means the product is built around intact whole grain rather than refined flour with whole grain added back for the label. The ingredient list is grains and legumes, sprouted wheat, barley, lentils, millet, spelt. No preservatives, no dough conditioners, no datum, no calcium propionate, no added sugar in the original variety. The texture is the tell, dense, chewy, hearty. Most people find it best toasted. Look for it in the freezer section, not the bread aisle. Without preservatives, this loaf molds at room temperature. That is not a flaw. That is proof you are holding actual food. Bread that refuses to spoil was designed for a warehouse shelf, not a human body. Best option number 2, 1 Degree Organics. 1 Degree does something almost no other bread brand in America bothers to do. They publish the farm source for every single ingredient. Scan the QR code on the bag and trace the wheat back to the specific field where it was grown. Not the country, not the region, the farm. 1 Degree carries the BioCheck non-glyphosate certified seal and, according to the company, submits random product samples to accredited third-party laboratories every month. No regulation requires this. No law demands it. They do it because testing the product and publishing the results is the only way to actually prove what you are selling. The ingredient list: organic sprouted whole wheat, water, organic whole grain oats, organic cane sugar, yeast, sea salt, organic cultured wheat. That is everything. No datum, no calcium sulfate, no monoglycerides. Open a bag and the grain smell is immediate. The texture pulls apart, instead of compressing and springing back. It tears. It behaves like something baked, not engineered. Distribution is still limited. You may need a natural grocery store or a direct order. That inconvenience is real. It is also what happens when a brand has not handed its supply chain over to a $5 billion industrial operator. Best option number 1. Silver Hills Sprouted Bakery. If Ezekiel's density is a significant texture adjustment, or you just want a clean, everyday sandwich loaf you don't have to think twice about, Silver Hills is the most practical recommendation on this entire list. Silver Hills is a Canadian family-owned company. All products carry the BioCheck non-glyphosate certified seal, with residues verified below laboratory detection limits on an ongoing basis. When the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015, Silver Hills publicly stated that the classification shaped their sourcing standards. That is a company responding to evidence rather than lobbying against it. Their loaves deliver fiber, whole grains, and protein per serving. The Omega variety is a verified source of omega-3 ALA, relevant for heart health. The full lineup is plant-based, nut-free, non-GMO project verified, and certified vegan. In the United States, available at Sprouts, Whole Foods, and other natural grocery chains. In Canada, at Loblaws, Metro, and major national chains. Every batch tested, every result verified. No corporate parent running a margin calculation that overrides the sourcing standard. If you take one thing from this video, it is this. The front of the bread bag is a marketing decision, and the lab result is the actual product. A clean loaf tells you where its grain came from and shows you the test results, because verifiable transparency, not price, and not a heritage logo, is the only thing that separates the 3 brands worth buying from the 10 that are not. Tonight, check whatever loaf is in your kitchen, squeeze the bag, read past the front label to the ingredient panel, and ask the one question every brand on the avoid list quietly refused to answer. Can you show me the results?